In 2024, I headed to East Africa for a tour of 3 countries. Nairobi, Kenya and Kampala, Uganda are among the cities I spent some time in. Here's my genuine and unbiased experience in these cities. You might not like what I have to say, but know that these are genuine experiences. Before I proceed, I feel the need to let you know that this is not a GDP, an economic or HDI comparison. I am not comparing 2 countries. I am comparing my experiences in these countries. So before you type the comment, I know you're already typing, watch the video, you would enjoy it, but this is not a comparison of Uganda or Kenya size. Welcome to Nairobi. Nairobi is a city that has been on my travel list for quite some time, but university and other things like COVID stopped me from visiting until 2024. Kampala on the other hand has not really been on my radar, but during my planning I learned that I could do multiple countries on one visa, and I was like, why not? So here we are in Nairobi and Kampala. What did I love about Nairobi? Nairobi is a city that has a lot to love, and I'm not saying it to try to pander to Kenyans or to Tijuans. Nairobi is one of the most exciting cities I've been to in Africa, and definitely one of the most developed in terms of infrastructure. The weather is great. I was born and raised in Lagos, Nigeria, and if you've ever been to coastal Nigeria, you would know that for most of the year, the humidity and heat is unbearable, even for locals. So for people from other countries, it might be impossible to deal with. I also loved the energy of young Nairobians. Is that what they are called? Nairobians? I don't know, I might be wrong. But I love the energy of the young people. But you could see that something was wrong in the air, and that was like a couple weeks before the infamous Kenyan protest. So as happy as they were, you could see that something was wrong. There are lots of things to do in Nairobi that if I started listing it off for you, would probably rename the video to Things to Do in Nairobi 2025. On the other hand, Kampala has never really been a city that I plan to visit, and this is not an insult to Uganda, but it's just never been on my radar. But I was glad I visited it for the right and wrong reasons, to be honest. The weather wasn't bad, but the scenery in Kampala and Uganda as a whole really surprised me. When I think of East Africa, I always think of like sparse lands, the way I used to see on Nat Geo while growing up. I always associated that with East Africa, but going to Rwanda and Uganda and seeing just how green these countries were, it was something new for me, and I really enjoy seeing that. The crane is the national bird of Uganda, and I was excited to see it in the city. They were walking around doing their things and owning the city as they should. Unfortunately, Kampala felt too much like home for the wrong reasons. I survived the robbery attempt literally 3 hours into the country. It was a welcome development to move into Uganda from Rwanda and actually hear people speaking English. I love that about the city, and I've never been happier to hear people speak English in my life. Why don't you do me a favor by clicking the subscribe button? It will take you less than a second, and when you do that, you can also smash the like button to support. If you are planning a trip to Kenya, especially as a Nigerian, I expect a few Nigerians to be watching this video for obvious reasons. If you're planning a trip to Kenya, I feel like speaking English alone should be more than enough. English and Swahili are widely spoken amongst most people, or at least most people in the capital city. So speaking just English is more than enough to get you by. But if you are feeling local and are feeling funky, you can definitely learn a couple Swahili words here and there. I'm sure the people you're going to be excited to see you trying. Young Nairobians love to party, and they party hard. So if you don't have the stamina, you might not get out unscathed. Additionally, as mentioned earlier, you could see a sense of discontent, especially among young people during my visit there. And then I was like, I know this feeling. This was what I could feel in 2020, right before the answers protest. Uganda is another English-speaking country, and if you are a Nigerian that plans to visit Uganda, speaking English should be more than enough to get you by. But I feel like speaking only English, you can get away with that in Kenya more than Uganda, but speaking just English is more than enough. And before coming, I always thought that all East African countries had Swahili as the official language or lingua franca. But then I learned about Luganda. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. That's like the lingua franca on ground. So if you have have a Ugandan friend, you can tell them to teach you a couple phrases so you can wow people when you get them. Like, oh, where did you learn that from? You know, get cheap points, especially if you have friends or family out there. But yeah, English and Uganda, it should be good. I had always heard about Uganda's nightlife, and everybody that I told that I was going to Uganda was like, yo, the nightlife is crazy. Unfortunately, I didn't experience that. I'm not really a nightlife person, but if I ever go back there, definitely we'll be there. Kenya Airways is currently making waves across Africa, and in a way are trying to go against the big guy Ethiopian Airways for dominance on the continent. Obviously, Ethiopian is far larger than any other airline on the continent, but Kenya Airways has been doing a lot to compete. Nairobi airport is decent in my opinion, but I just imagined what it must have felt like in the 70s. It felt like it must have been a cutting edge terminal when it was built, but unfortunately it feels a bit tired, and I still do not know why a city like Nairobi and an airport like this has only one runway. I feel like that's just reckless. What's gonna happen if something happens to the runway? If an airline is taking off for landing and then they have an issue on the runway, does the entire capital city shut down? But that's just me. You could also see the famous Nairobi Expressway when we took off, and a lot of people were talking about it. And you know what? I'll give it to them. It's a thing to be proud of, but everybody talked about it while I was there and before I came. On the flip side, Ugandan Airways is back, and they are also trying to make waves by connecting west to East Africa. I know that Uganda Airways began flying to Lagos, I think in 2023, and then they expanded a route to Abuja, which is always nice. That means if you really want to go to Uganda, you can get on one flight, 4.5 hours later, you are in the country. I was going to use Ugandan Airways to go to Rwanda, but I did not understand the airport. I was like, I'm going to Kampala. Why does it say Entebbe on the flight ticket? And I'm like, nah, I don't know where that is, and I'm not taking the chance of being dumped in another part of the country. So I ended up not booking a ticket. Then I found out that Entebbe is like, I don't know, like a suburb or an extension of the capital. There are plans to expand the airport and make it more competitive, and I believe it's currently ongoing in a sense. But yeah, Ugandan Airways might be the key that finally opens up this country to a new audience or customer base in West Africa. Odds are, if you plan to visit Kenya as a non-East African, you are not going with Nairobi as your main destination. Obviously, Kenya is a very popular tourist destination, and growing up I used to see the country a lot on Nat Geo. Where we have the safaris, we have hiking. The country has a surprisingly long coastline. There is so much to do in this country that if you had a year to do it all, you still wouldn't be able to get it all done. You might want to do your research more, because going for safaris and all might not be the cheapest thing, and then going hiking, especially in the more prestigious mountains and hills, might also not be the cheapest. But do your research and keep in mind that there's a price for locals and East Africans, and then there's a price for foreigners. So the price you see online might not be the price you might be required to always inquire and ask. But there's a lot to do in Kenya, and you should definitely take advantage of it. I was pleasantly surprised at the sheer amount of things you could do in Uganda beyond Kampala. Unfortunately, I didn't really plan to visit this country. It was more of a stopover for me between Rwanda and Uganda, but then I was pleasantly surprised at how green it is, as mentioned earlier. And for a landlocked country, Uganda has a lot of water. Oh my god, there are islands, literal islands off the coast of Lake Victoria. They have beaches, like actual beaches where people go, and then this was against everything I thought I knew about landlocked countries. But yeah, the River Nile also has its source in Uganda and runs through a large chunk of the country, so there really is a lot to do beyond Kampala. And the people I met, like friends I made there, told me that Jinja is like the resort town. I might be wrong. It's a popular weekend getaway. After a long week of working and trying to keep your phone from getting stolen, people go out to Jinja to have a great time, and you definitely should consider going to Jinja too. Unfortunately, my experience in Kenya did not get off to the best start. I was extorted at the Uganda-Kenya border, Busia border, primarily by Kenya Kenyan immigration officers, and when I paid their bribe just to ensure that my trip didn't get wasted, it really hit me and ruined the entire trip for me. Also, while going on a walk around the parliament and I believe Serena Hotel in Kampala, I was inches away from losing my phone to two people on a border, and then I learned that that's something that happens fairly frequently. They're on their bikes and then they drag your phone from you or your valuable. But yeah, these countries are still worth visiting, but you can visit both of them on one trip by traveling with Kenya Airways or Ugandan Airways, having an extended layover in the country, and then continue your journey to your destination. It's a way to experience these two countries for yourself without spending a fortune. Until the next video, your friend from the Ukodo YouTube channel wishes you love, peace, and prosperity.